We got one more body coming in.
We got one more body coming in. People may trickle in. I'll throw a few more. Are there any empty chairs over there?
There's a couple.
Yes. Let me pull them over here so if folks come in, they can just look right there. And then it's all you, buddy.
Okay.
Actually, can I have y'all show the other side over there so folks trickle in? Just make it easier for them to be less disturbing.
And another announcement is that lunch will be moved to 12:30.
That will start when they stop.
There's more. Hurry up, about to start. Come on. Think about left this and we're going to be late. I hope he's always.
Did I miss anything important? All right. Wow, thank you so much for showing up. Okay, this is going to be a talk on knowing your rights, also known as you have no rights. It really depends upon the envelope you're willing to push, what you're willing to do to stand up for your rights. My name is, I don't know why I put Gerald Friedman here. That's my business name. It's my lawyer name. I'm Jerry Friedman. Call me Jerry. I'll respond to Gerald. Anybody familiar with this scene? I had this picture last year, so people from last year may recognize it. Anybody want to remind us what this was about? UC Davis protest 2011. I think it was part of the Occupy movement. And Lieutenant Pike here gratuitously pepper spraying some protesters. The end result of this was about a $1 million settlement. Pretty much what happened is everybody who was pepper sprayed, they got their tuition paid. Because somebody was recording, somebody took pictures. So this is me at the Los Angeles Zoo being lectured by a park ranger. Some people here in the room will find that amusing. So I'm a civil rights attorney. I'm licensed in the state of California. I can practice in Texas and Colorado, but I don't like to travel. I'm a member of the National Lawyers Guild. The National Lawyers Guild is similar and, in my opinion, better than the ACLU. They've been around a long time. They do a lot of First Amendment cases. The main distinction between the ACLU and the NLG, the ACLU believes in pure free speech, so they will represent Nazis, but the NLG does not believe in fascism, and so they will not represent Nazis. So that, to me, is the distinction. I'm also a member of the National Police Accountability Project, which is a group of attorneys across the country who share information about suing the government, usually police, but also prisons and other government officials, but usually police. I have been a National Lawyers Guild legal observer at I don't know how many protests. I have 30 here, probably more. I've been an activist since 1990. I've been a vegan since 91, 92. I've participated in I don't know how many protests. So I have business cards here if anybody wants to pick them up. If you don't grab a business card, my email address I hope is easy to remember, jerry@lawoffice, my initials, jdf.com. A nice quote from Elie Wiesel: "There may be times when we are powerless to prevent injustice, but there must never be a time when we fail to protest." We'll talk about what speech is protected. So conceptually, what speech is being protected, the speech that the government is not allowed to infringe on are things such as political and social and religious, and the ideas that you have that shape the society we live in. This has the highest degree of protection in California and in the country. I have union stuck up there because California does have some special protection for unions. So if you do union activism, you get all the great protections, and then sometimes you get a little better protections. Almost the highest protection is commercial free speech. Of course, that's our business community, our corporate community wanting to tell us what to buy. So their corporate free speech messages also have a high degree of protection. Our free speech is higher, and how that plays out is that if you see that a business is advertising something, a business is engaged in free speech, and police tell you that you can't, well, the business is doing it, you get higher protection, and so you get a sense that the police are not telling you, or the police don't know the laws. General speech is still protected, it just doesn't hold that cherished part in our society, so that just means that if you're having a conversation outside with some friends about whatever, police still can't really infringe on your speech. They can't tell you, they can't arrest you for what you're talking about. You won't get some special protections of social, political free speech, but the speech is still protected. The only speech that is not protected is what I refer to as injurious speech, that speech that will hurt somebody. And what I mean by that, if you are inciting imminent violence, that is a crime. Emphasis on imminent, you could post on a social media page, hey, let's go beat somebody up. That's not considered imminent violence. But if you're in a room of people and say, hey, let's beat somebody up, that would be imminent. That imminence is strictly analyzed. So for example, I have here, what about the little old lady? How hard is it going to be to get a little old lady to beat somebody up? Probably be pretty difficult, but if you get some bikers and you're trying to get them to beat somebody up, it'd probably be a lot easier. So when you're looking at imminence, you're looking at the community you're talking to. This is traditionally why rioting and routing is against the law, because it's easy to get a mob going and to hurt somebody. Threats against others, so this wouldn't be necessarily a group threat of inciting imminent violence, but an individual threat. If you're challenging somebody to a fight, that kind of speech is not protected. False statements of fact, I have here fraud. Fraud is not protected speech. If you are lying to somebody to take advantage of them, that's fraud. Perjury, when you take an oath to tell the truth and you don't tell the truth, that is not protected speech. And defamation. I was asked by somebody to talk a little bit more about defamation because there are a lot of protests, a lot of activists who are screaming animal killer, murderer, and things like that. When you make a false statement of fact, if you call somebody a murderer and they're not a murderer, then they can sue you for defamation. So when you are protesting, when you are screaming and shouting, whatever it is, just be sure what you say is truthful or it's opinion. Don't call somebody a murderer if they're not. There's a lot of wiggle room in there, so you might want to talk to an attorney for individual statements, but conceptually think about what you're saying, and if you're calling somebody a rapist, a pedophile, things like that, they can sue you, and that is not protected speech. Misappropriating speech is not protected, so pretty much it's copyrighted materials. You can't copy what somebody else said and say, oh, it's free speech. It's not. And I have here unlicensed speech. What I mean by that is specifically, there are professions, the easy ones are doctor and lawyer. There are professions where you need a license to give advice. And in that context, it's only if you are holding yourself out as a doctor, you're holding yourself out as a lawyer. So if you're at a protest and you tell somebody, hey, don't talk to the cops, you're not holding yourself as a lawyer, you're just saying don't talk to the cops. I have heard police say, you're not a lawyer, you can't say that. Ignore the police. The concept is that you take somebody into a room, you're giving them individualized advice, they're telling you some secrets. That kind of speech is not protected. In the same way, how many people here have told people, like, don't eat meat, it's not healthy, don't eat French fries. Isn't that medical advice? Of course not. You're not holding yourself out as a doctor. You're giving nutritional information, free speech. But you take somebody in, you take somebody into a room and you go through their medical charts, you're giving them specific recommendations. That's the kind of licensed speech that is not protected. All speech is not verbal. Some speech is conduct. The classic example, the second point is burning a flag is the classic example, because not only is burning a flag, but it's also you're speaking against the flag, the country that you're burning, right? I have here at the top boycotts versus vandalism. And so the conduct of a boycott is free speech. You are allowed to tell people don't shop at this business. You are allowed to cause economic harm verbally through your conduct of a boycott, which could be marching in front of the business, holding signs and whatnot. The type of economic harm you're not allowed to do would be more pecuniary, more of like a receipt driven. If you engage in vandalism, even though you might think of that as speech, because you're actually doing harm to the property, that's not considered free speech. That's the conduct that can be criminalized. In the same way with burning a flag. Burning the flag itself is symbolic speech, it's protected. But if you burn a flag in an environment like this, you can be arrested for arson, because you're looking at not just the symbolic speech, but you're looking at the immediate consequence of that, setting a fire. So they can criminalize the arson aspect, they cannot criminalize the speech aspect. There was also a case about ripping draft registration cards back in the Vietnam War. People would have a registration card and they would tear them symbolically. The distinction is that because that draft registration card was a unique document, it was a unique government document, you would get in trouble for tearing that unique government document, as opposed to burning the flag. And how many flags are there? There's a distinction also with graffiti and chalking sidewalks. So in California, both graffiti, paint graffiti, and chalking sidewalks are technically illegal. The way that the vandalism law is written, you can be cited for chalking a sidewalk. It is unlikely, if that went to trial, that you would lose because of the same tension of burning a flag. It is still symbolic speech. And what do you have to do to get rid of chalk on the sidewalk? You just wash it down. But the way that it says, the way the law is written right now, you can be arrested for chalking the sidewalk. Wearing armbands, again, this is not speech, but you're identifying yourself, wearing a shirt. This is all considered speech, which is protected. Even ethnic hairstyles are considered protected speech. There have been black students who would wear their hair a certain way, and they were told by the school they can't do that, and that's still considered protected speech. Emphasis, again, is that speech is not just verbal, and political contributions where you spend your money for politics, that is also protected speech. What laws do we have that protect speech? Conceptually, we have our government as a constitutional democracy. We want people to engage in democracy. We want people to engage in free speech. And there are lots of laws and lots of precedent that will protect you when you do this. Conceptually, we have the people over government. As a practical endeavor, the government is going to look for a way where you get your free speech, and whoever you're speaking against, either they get their free speech, or if it's a corporation, the corporation gets to do its business. They try to find a way that everybody can do what they want to do, what they are entitled to do. But only when there is a conflict that your speech necessarily prevents them from doing what they're doing, typically free speech will triumph. There are many cases where this would be an easy example of commercial speech. So you're going to a stadium to protest something going on in the stadium, and the stadium wants to conduct its business, and they're saying that you're driving their customers away. When there is that conflict where your being there is in conflict with their business, when there's a conflict that can't be resolved, the First Amendment is supposed to triumph. Your free speech is supposed to triumph. But otherwise, they're going to look for a way that everybody can do what they want to do. I'll go through our Federal Bill of Rights very quickly and explain how it applies to the states. We have the First Amendment. I have all these written conceptually from the framework of what the federal government is not allowed to do. So the First Amendment says that the federal government is not allowed to punish you, is not allowed to exclude your ideas. That is religion, that is speech, that is the press, anything mental, your ideas that you want to get out, the federal government cannot regulate your ideas. The Second Amendment is not regulating guns. The government can't regulate your guns. I'll jump to the Fourth Amendment. The federal government cannot regulate your body or your property. If they want to arrest you, they need a good reason, probable cause, they need a good reason to arrest you. If they want to take your property, they need probable cause to take your property. They can't just do it willy-nilly. Okay, so more specifically on the First Amendment, it actually says that Congress, that's our federal government, can make no law that limits your freedom of speech, limits your ability to peaceably assemble, or limit your ability to petition the government for a redress of grievances. You're allowed to tell the government what you want them to do. The term freedom of association is not in the First Amendment, but that is the same concept. And so if you want to protest some event individually, you have the right to do that individually as your freedom of speech. If you want to do it with a group of people, you can do that as a group of people. It's your right to assemble. If you want to do it as a group of people who know each other, you are a nonprofit, you are something, you have a right to associate. And none of these can be limited by the federal government. So invariably over the years, the government has tried to find ways, certain police departments have tried to find ways to limit your free speech, and so this is supposed to be all-encompassing. I just wanted to flesh out the Bill of Rights. None of these typically apply in a free speech context. I do want to draw attention to the 9th Amendment, which is we citizens have natural rights. I'm going to address that later on in the presentation. And all the 9th Amendment means is that we have the rights that were written into the books, into the Constitution. We have these rights. The 9th Amendment says there are other rights we have, not just those that we have written. The post-Civil War Reformation brought in the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment rights as a package. The 13th and 15th hopefully should not apply to anyone in any free speech context, but the 14th Amendment applies in a large variety of ways. The 14th Amendment has become a catch-all for any of your rights that are violated that should not be violated. And what that means, in effect, is you'll see the due process in the lower left. We have due process rights. And that fundamentally means that if the government is fundamentally unfair to you, then you can sue for them being unfair. It is a catch-all. It doesn't say how they're being unfair. But you go to an attorney and you say that you lost your government job and they didn't give you any warning, the courts are going to say that's fundamentally unfair. And so if you feel that the government is doing something fundamentally unfair to you, then the framing is that is conceptually a violation of your due process rights. The due process rights also give us those federal rights that I went through, the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment. All those federal rights are now applied to the states through the 14th Amendment. What happened was that before the Civil War, everybody had protection from the federal government, but they didn't have protection from the state government. And so after the Civil War, they're saying, okay, all these federal government protections, we're going to protect you from the state as well. So your First Amendment right applies for the federal government and the state government, whereas what I had said previously, it's just these federal protection from the federal government. And there's also a wide variety of equal protection rights. In a protest context, the easiest way to conceptualize that is that if they're going to be giving the Girl Scouts the right to free speech to sell Girl Scout cookies, they have to protect you the same way and let you have your free speech. Equal protection says that they can't discriminate. It's like the anti-discrimination law that says that they can't treat you differently based on what you're trying to say. To enforce the First Amendment, so all of the amendments, they don't have any enforcement provision in and of itself. You can't go to court. Technically, you can't go to court and say my First Amendment right was violated. The First Amendment doesn't say you have the right to sue. It just says you have the right to speech. And so you have the right, which is great. And so here, 42 United States Code 1983 is a law that says with this law, you can sue for someone who violated your First Amendment. So it is the vehicle. You have the right to free speech, and then you have essentially 1983, Section 1983 gives you the right to go to court. 1983 says that a private person, you don't have to be a citizen, you can be any private person here, you could be a person visiting, right? A private person can sue for violations of your constitutional rights, which we went through, under color of state law. And what color of state law means is that your rights have been violated because of a rule of a state. So California has rules that make police departments. They have California Highway Patrol. This is all under color of state law. California Highway Patrol has no power if it weren't for that state law that gives them power. And so if California Highway Patrol violates your rights through the law that lets them do that, then you can sue them. So that's a long way around to say that you can sue government officials of a state, of a county, of a city, of a school board, of any state institution or smaller institution like a county or a city. Under the federal government has different laws that you can use to sue the federal government. Because the federal government is considered the king, and you cannot sue the king without the king's permission, it is difficult to sue the federal government. They have one decision here, Bivens versus the Drug Enforcement Administration Agency. They have one decision that says in a certain circumstance you can sue federal police for violating your rights. But this decision is not as expansive as Section 1983, which lets you sue California Highway Patrol, city police, anybody. This decision is very limited, and the federal government, this conservative Supreme Court has been making it more and more difficult to use this law to sue the federal government. The example that I have in one of my cases is I had represented a gang member who we had proven was framed by the FBI. The FBI knew he did not commit the crime, but they arrested him and he had to stay in jail for 2.5 years waiting trial. And so I used, because it's the FBI, it's the federal government, I used Bivens to sue the FBI for framing my client, and the court said, you're not allowed to use this law this way, and they threw it out of court. So if you're going to sue the federal government, if you're going to protest the president and Secret Service arrests you or FBI arrests you, it is much more difficult to sue the federal government. There's also something called the Federal Torts Act, which is another way the federal government limits the way that you could sue them. So for example, if a police officer punches you, a federal police officer punches you, you can sue them for battery, you can sue them for assault. But if they defame you, you're not allowed to sue the federal government for defaming you. So, how does that apply to you? If the federal government says that you burned down a Hummer dealership, then you're not going to be able to sue them for defamation. But if the CHP says that you did that, if city police says you did that, you can sue the city police, the state police. And there are a smattering of other laws that will protect you that you can sue under. It's not just these two for the federal government. There's a law that I like very much. It's called the Privacy Protection Act, which I'll talk about a little bit more later in the presentation. The Privacy Protection Act says that essentially if you're a journalist, you don't have to be an official journalist, but if essentially you're a journalist, you're taking a video of a protest, and your intent is to put that video on YouTube, you want to broadcast that, the government cannot take your camera and look through your camera. You have kind of a journalist protection, and if they do that, you can sue. And so there are a variety of other laws that if the federal government violates your rights, you can sue under these other laws. It's just the usual laws or the laws in common with state lawsuits, those have a lot of limitations on it. I'm thinking now, I'm sorry if this is overly technical, I want it to be more practical, but we'll just keep going through. California Constitution, so we have two constitutions. We have the federal constitution, just like we have a federal president. We have a state constitution, just like we have a state governor. We have two different governments we operate under. We have protections under the federal constitution. We have protections under the state constitution. The California Constitution, essentially the First Amendment of the state constitution says that every person can freely speak, but you're going to be held accountable for what you say. So really what that means is the same thing, that you can't start a riot, you can't defame people, you can't commit fraud. You have the right to speech, just don't injure somebody with your speech. You also have the First Amendment type rights to petition the government to assemble and so forth. So I frequently will file lawsuits, and I will put both constitutions in there, violations of both constitutions, depending upon what the lawsuit is about. But they both have some nuances, making one better than the other, so I just put both in there so I get the benefit of both. Am I on the right slide? Yeah. So just like the federal government, we have Section 1983. In California, the functional equivalent of Section 1983 is great. California gives you the best free speech protections of any state and of the federal government. Under California law, there's a Ralph Act, which allows a private person, which is you, to sue anybody. It doesn't matter if it's under state law, color of state law. Under the federal government, you can only sue police and city council and those type people. Under California, you can sue anybody who commits violence against you or intimidates you or threatens violence against you based on a protected characteristic. And one of the protected characteristics is an animal rights activist. And so if you go to a protest and somebody punches you, not because of who you are, but because you're an animal rights activist, you can sue under the Ralph Act. The Ralph Act was designed to stop skinhead violence against Jews, blacks, and other minorities. And you may have noticed in California we have a lot less of that. And I'm sure one of the reasons is because of this law. It is a powerful law. But when the Ralph Act was enacted, they found it didn't go far enough. And so California enacted the Bain Act. And the Bain Act gives a little more wiggle room. It is essentially the same thing as the Ralph Act, except you don't have to have violence or threats of violence or intimidation. You can sue for threats, intimidation, or coercion. Somebody can threaten you, intimidate you, or coerce you, and you can sue on that account. It just gives you more space, and it's not based on your protected characteristic as an animal rights activist, as a Democrat, as a feminist. That doesn't matter. What matters is that they're trying to interfere with your constitutional rights, your rights as a free speaker. And then the note on this is because everybody loves free speech, if they are using speech against you, if they are threatening you with speech only, that threat has to include a threat of violence. And so if they're going to threaten to out you as a bisexual, out you as a homosexual, that is not a threat that includes violence, and you cannot sue on that basis. The threat has to include violence if it's verbal only. You're right. When you sue under the federal Bill of Rights, First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, you have to prove how much you were injured. If you can't show that you were injured, you might not get very much. You might get $1 if you can show that. There was a case where these two hunters were stopped by police because they were walking back to their lodge with guns, and the cops are like, why do they have these guns? The hunters could not prove that they were injured by being stopped, and the jury awarded them with $0. They said the cops were wrong, but you weren't injured. So that's the federal Section 1983 lawsuit. The terrific thing with the Ralph Act, with the Bain Act, is that if you can prove no injury, if you can't even prove you got a hangnail, you still get $4,000 minimum. That is the baseline. If somebody violates the Ralph Act, the Brady Act, Tom Bain Act, it's a $4,000 minimum. Your actual damages are tripled. If you go to the hospital and get $50,000 of medical bills, you sue for $150,000. And the last is the civil penalty of $25,000. What that means is that if, I said in the Bain Act that they do not have to target you based on your protected characteristic, but if they do, they pay an extra $25,000. And so there is a framework where you as a protester are protesting your heart out at a rodeo and somebody threatens, intimidates, coerces you, they take a beer bottle, they throw it at you, trying to get you not to protest, that is an act of violence. It is not just speech. They are targeting you because you're an animal activist. You can't prove any damages because you weren't hit. 4,000 minimum plus 25,000 civil penalty. If you go to court and you win, it's $29,000. So this is California protection. This is one of the reasons why California is one of the best states to engage in free speech. I have here at the bottom that you can mix and match your causes of action. You can mix and match everything. You can sue for the First Amendment and the Bain Act. It's really up to your attorney to figure that out, but you only get a single recovery. And so if you prove that you suffered $10,000 of damages, you don't get to collect $10,000 for every theory. You just get $10,000. That was your injury. Where speech is protected. This slide and the next slide are probably the two most important. If you are taking notes, take vigorous notes. I hear people say, public property, you can protest, private property, you can't. And that's not true. Some public property, you can protest, some you can't. Some private property, you can protest, some you can't. Conceptually, California protects things that are like the Old Town Square. The Old Town Square where there's a bunch of shops, people would pull out their soapbox and stand and they would orate, or they would beg for money, or they would tell you Jesus is coming, or whatever. That type of environment is highly protected in California, but we don't have those environments anymore. Those have become shopping malls. And so California says, you can now protest, I say now, this is back from the 70s, you can protest in shopping malls. You can't protest in the individual store, but the common areas, you can protest. Outside the mall, you can protest. It doesn't matter if it's private property or not. That's not the question. The question is it like a town square? So on the left side, we have the public. On the right side, we have the private. You have the most protection in green. Most protection is what's called traditional public fora. These are places where people traditionally engage in free speech. These are the streets, the sidewalks, and the parks. You may remember we've had marches down the streets. They will shut down streets so you can protest there. That's the example that you have the highest protection to protest in the streets. You have the highest right to protest in what's called a designated public forum. And that would be, the easiest example would be if you have a city hall and a staircase that is not a sidewalk, that is not a park, that is not a street, but the government may say, for your protest, you can use these stairs. Once they designate that as public fora, you have the highest protection. And then on the right side, I have their private property town squares. If we take a step down from that, you have a lot of protection in neighborhoods. There are some restrictions in neighborhoods that have been maintained, but not many. Pretty much people want to be able to go to their home and sleep, and so if you infringe on that too much, then they can restrict it, but mostly you have the right to protest in a neighborhood. Public universities, ports of entry, airports and seaports, for example. You have the second highest protections. There have been a lot of Hare Krishnas that would typically go and ask for donations in airports, and they've been sued repeatedly by the airport, and the government, the courts say they can do that. They can make some restrictions, but they can't ban them. On the right side, for private property, quasi town squares and shopping malls, this will be like strip malls. The emphasis here, as I'll go down and explain a little bit more, is if there is a single solitary store that is not a town square, that is not a shopping mall, and you do not have a right to protest if there's a single store. I've seen many Trader Joe's, for example, surrounded by a parking lot, no other businesses. You protest there, they can arrest you. Private cities and parks, there aren't too many private cities anymore. I can't think of one, but historically there have been private cities. And then private parks, you also have a significant right to protest in a private park. If that private park is used for the public, it's owned privately, but the public uses it, you'll have the right to protest there. If it's a private park in like a gated community, you're not going to have a right to protest there. Giant venues are very important. Typically, I mean, the big case that comes to mind is Magic Mountain. There were protests inside the property of Magic Mountain, outside of the ticketing area, but like on the sidewalks by the parking lots. Private property, single business, but the court said that this business is so large, they can give a little bit of space for protesters. In the middle, I have leased public property, private sidewalks and parking lots. This is all marginal. The easiest example would be there was a Sony, I don't know if it's still there, a Sony Stadium in San Diego. They had a 50-year lease, and it's public property. The court said that even though it is public property, a 50-year lease is so long, it has the effect of being private property, and they were able to limit protests. I'm worried I'm misremembering this, but they were allowed to limit protests there because it was, they considered it private property. I'm going to contradict myself in a moment. There's nuances. I'm not really going to contradict myself, but there's nuances. So the point is that because the property is public, you can't go inside of that stadium and protest because it's still considered private property inside the stadium, even though it is public property. And then as we go down a little bit on the public property side, you have no right to protest inside of a government building, even though it's public. You have no right to protest inside of a post office, even though it's public. You do not want to go to a military base and protest inside the military base or inside of a prison, even though it's public. It doesn't matter that it's public. The question is this land something that is used traditionally for free speech? On the right side, I have solo businesses there, which again is like the Trader Joe's, private businesses. You can't protest inside of a private business. I have here a private home. Of course, you can protest inside your own private home, but you can't protest inside of somebody else's private home. And so that, the point I want to drive is that, is this land you're protesting on normally the land where protests occurred? Is it a sidewalk? Is it a park? Is it a town square? You have a lot of rights there. If it's not like that, you have less and less rights. And so this diagram, I try to explain it a little better. On the far left, the island, don't protest on the island, even though it might look like a sidewalk. It's not a sidewalk. You can protest on the street if you get a permit. If you want to break a law to protest, if you want to protest in the street, and that violates the vehicle code, if the city says you cannot use an amplified sound device, you can't use a megaphone, and you want to break that law, you apply for a permit to break that law, and the city needs to work with you. And so that's why you can protest in the street with a permit. Don't just go protest in the street, they'll arrest you. The sidewalk is the terrific place to protest. On the right-hand side, you see that there is no sidewalk. The street goes right up to the property line. And when you have no sidewalk, you have the street going right to the property line, there is a 3-foot band along that property, that private property, that you can use as a pedestrian. So if there's a house and there's grass and there's a street and there's no sidewalk, you can walk on that grass 3 feet and they can't do anything about it. But it's for you to use as a pedestrian. It is not for you to use as a protester. And so if you wanted to protest on the right side, you should protest on the street. Have your feet on the street. Don't go on the easement. On the left side here, I have grass, good place to protest. I have 2 free speech zones. I'm going to talk about those in a moment. You may protest in the parking lot. Just be careful. Don't block anybody. Don't get hit. But you are legally allowed to protest in parking lots. In the orange octagon or heptagon I have there on the bottom, you have, when there is an environment where they are trying to, where the company is trying to bring people in to socialize, to eat, to sit, relax, to enjoy, you have very high protection in an environment when a business is trying to bring people together. If you if you go to like a shopping mall, you will have more right to protest in the food court than outside of a store. Again, the idea being that this is an environment where they're trying to bring people together to hang out. And that goes for shopping malls, that goes for any outside restaurants or any type of venue. Then we have the internal walkways, those are considered sidewalks. We have a ticket booth. You cannot protest beyond the ticket booth. When you go beyond a ticket booth, when you have a ticket, that ticket gives you a contract for what you're allowed to do. When you enter the facility, I guarantee you, it's not going to say you have a right to free speech. So you want to stay on the free side of the ticket booth. I have the 2 free speech zones there. Does anybody know when the government can put you in a free speech zone? Or conceptually? Why would the law be allowed to squeeze you into a free speech zone?
When you're blocking traffic, when you're...
Good, blocking traffic. So I would expand that when there's an issue of public safety. If there's a genuine issue of public safety, not just because they say it, if there is a genuine issue of public safety, they can put you in a free speech zone. That is typically the case of overcrowded venues. If there is a state fair and it is thick with people, they will have more right to put you in a zone for your free speech. Because imagine there's a bomb, imagine there's some panic and people are running. And so that's where the government has the start to be able to limit where you can speak. That's public safety 1. Public safety 2 is counter protesters. If you have the Israelis and Palestinians, you have the Jews and the skinheads, whatever the opposite, the animal activists and the whatever. If there is a genuine issue of safety, then they can separate you apart. Usually that's the decision of the police, as long as it's genuine. It's the decision of the police. And I wanted to make one comment. If there's an overcrowding issue, you're at a state fair, and they say go to the free speech zone, the law so far says that they can only do that essentially if you're extending your hand out or if you're having people extend their hand in. If you're handing out literature, you're blocking people in a crowded place. If people are giving you donations, they're blocking people, and so they can put you in a free speech zone. But if you're just walking around talking to people, they can't put you in a free speech zone. And there's, I know up in the Hollywood area, there's been issues of what's the difference between a public sidewalk and a private sidewalk. If you can't tell the difference, if you're looking at the sidewalk and you can't tell what's public and private, it's all public. If you can't tell the difference. In this picture, I have 2 different sidewalks here side by side. We have the glossier on the left and the regular concrete on the right. In this picture, you can only protest on the public sidewalk because you have that visual cue, these are different. But if this was all concrete, it's all the same concrete, and they say this is private property, private sidewalk, you can ignore that. You have to have the visual cue. In other words, you don't have to take their word for it. This is Reliance Stadium in Houston. I used to live in Houston, so I have this as the example. I'm just going to show this as a real-life example. So the sidewalk, you can protest the sidewalk, you can protest the parking lot. Here's the ticketing booth. You cannot protest in here, of course. And as with all things, if you're protesting around the ticketing booth, you just want to make sure that you're not blocking people, you're not... The law wants everybody to get along with the law, wants everybody to be reasonable. So hey, if you want to protest, that's great, don't block anybody. Illegal blocking is malicious. It's like basketball blocking, it's not you happen to be there. If I'm standing on the sidewalk and somebody has to walk around me, that's not blocking. If I'm standing on the sidewalk, somebody tries to walk around me and I step in front of them, and they try to go the other way, and I step in front of them, that's blocking. Malicious, intentional. You're deliberately blocking them. It's not that you happen to be there. This slide should be short. When to talk to police? Don't. The police typically do not understand your First Amendment rights. They are there to investigate crimes. They will see you and think you are a criminal, and they will try to find a reason to remove you or arrest you. Some police get it. The reason why I have a career is because a lot of police don't. When you talk to police, you are only giving them ammunition to interfere with you. And so my most solemn advice when police want to talk to you is to turn your back. Can I just have a volunteer come up here? Somebody come up. I think you've been my volunteer before.
I'm nervous.
All right.
I take a volunteer.
So, police officer, and you want to know what I'm doing.
Who am I?
You're a police officer, I'm the protester. Boycott, boycott,
What are you doing here?
boycott, boycott. That's it. Thank you. All right? Just don't engage with them.
So you don't have to specifically say, I'm exercising my Fifth Amendment right not to speak to you.
When you are arrested, then you would want to go to that point. You're not arrested, this is considered consensual. They come up to you, they have a right to talk to you, and you have a right to turn your back. I have heard protesters say because of the authority of police, they wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. You gotta do what you gotta do, right? But just don't engage. It is so empowering to have somebody with a badge and a gun come up and talk to you, and you just turn your back. You are there for the protest, you're not there for the police officer, you're not there for the security. They're gonna take time away from your protest by talking to you. You may have a police liaison, you may have a police organizer, maybe direct the police to talk to that person, but you're there to protest. And the more you talk, the more ammunition they're gonna have against you or against other people. So going through the slide very quickly, if you're a witness to something, you have no obligation to talk as a witness, you're just a regular person. If you're a suspect of a crime, if they saw you run out of a vivisection lab holding a chimpanzee, you don't want to talk to the cops anyway. That is when you want to have your right to silence, right? Right to remain silent. And so in either way, there's no obligation to talk to police. The exceptions are, you may, if a police stops you and you don't know if you're being investigated, you might be detained, and if you don't know if you're detained, you might want to say, am I free to leave? And if they say, yes, you're not being detained, you leave. If they say, no, you're being detained, you shut up. But that's something you may want to say to a cop, am I free to leave? If the cops ask you to consent to a search, the same thing, I don't consent, right? Don't be silent, I don't consent to a search. So, other than those two, don't talk to cops. There is an unusual exception, there's a crime called misprison, which is a very strange word, but a misprison is when you know of a specific type of a crime that is so severe, the government obligates you to report it. The government requires you to tell the government that some crime is going on. In California, there's only two examples. If you have a certain profession, which I believe is the medical profession or education, and you know of child abuse, you are obligated to talk to the government and report it. And if you don't, you can be arrested for failing to talk. And the second thing I was surprised to see in California, if you know of treason, if you know people are going to plot to build up a government building, you are obligated to tell the government. Now when you tell the government, you don't have to identify yourself, but you have to tell the government. And so later on, if the building blows up and they find out that you knew and you didn't tell anybody, then you can go to jail just because you didn't speak. So those are the only times where you are affirmatively required to talk to the government. And non-citizen issues, so I'm not an immigration attorney, but if you have a citizenship issue, then you will want to talk to an immigration attorney, and you may have different obligations to talk to police because of your citizenship status.
Something that is very common, they just come right up to the police, comes right up to you and says, let me see your ID. So we automatically think we have to hand it out, right? So.
We automatically think that. They are the authority. I think I covered that a little later. I'll address that now and I'll skip over it later. In California, you are required to show your ID in two circumstances. One, if you are operating a motor vehicle and a police officer asks for your ID, you have to give your ID. Two, if you have been arrested and they want to identify you, you have to show your ID. Not if you're being investigated, not if there's a consensual cop coming up to you saying, hey, I want to see your ID. If you are being investigated, detained, you are not arrested, you are not handcuffed, they do not tell you you're under arrest, you do not have to identify yourself. And then let me emphasize too, on the point of identifying yourself, you still don't have to show your ID. You do if you're operating a motor vehicle. But if you're being detained, you don't have to show your ID, you have to identify yourself. Don't lie to the police. I would say, I'm Jerry Friedman. I identified myself. I'm not going to show them my ID, but I identified myself, okay? If you're in a car, you have to, if you're the driver, if you're the operator of a car, you have to show your identification.
This may not be related to this, but just with ICIG just going around asking, especially brown folks, for IDs, what do you do in that case?
So under an immigration, so if an undocumented person is asked by ICE, they should talk to an immigration attorney first. I'm not going to give that advice.
No.
If you are a citizen, you know, I would turn my back to them, but I'm not colored, right? You have no legal obligation to show them your identification when you're here. They're, you know, and I hate to give wrongful advice, immigration police do have extra authority within 100 miles of the border. And so they may have extra authority if we're 100 miles of the ocean, if we're within 100 miles of the perimeter of the country. So I don't know that I have a good answer for that. Because I'm white and I hate to say privileged, I wouldn't worry about it. But if somebody's colored, I think there was a Latino who was arrested for, I think, taking pictures, like he was a photojournalist, he was arrested, he's a citizen, but he's Latino, and I think they kept him for 100 days. I might be misremembering this. So talk to an immigration attorney, that's the best advice I can give you. That's not my area.
One more question.
Yes.
When you refuse to speak to the police, do you also have a right to record the interaction simultaneously?
Yes, always, 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 always. Film police, record police. If they're doing their job, you have 100% right to record if they're doing their job. You know, if they're in a restaurant minding their own business, if they're in the restroom, leave them alone. You know, if they're doing their job, you absolutely have a right to record them. The limitation is you can't interfere with their job, and so if they are in the process of an arrest, you have to give them space to do their job. So you can't like get in their face and record them while they're arresting somebody. So, and a lot of this I will cover later, yes?
And so only time you have to do like any type of identifying information or anything like about yourself, anything would be like when you're actually arrested, but up until then you don't have to like share your name like at all or detail of the protest or anything, right?
Correct. If they say you are arrested, if they put handcuffs on you, if they grab you, an arrest literally means they're holding you. If they're holding you, verbally they're holding you, physically they're holding you, then you are obligated to identify yourself. You don't have to have your driver's license on you. You don't have to have your passport on you, but you have to identify yourself. That may extend to how they can contact you. So I had I had a situation where that was the case before I was a lawyer. I gave my name, I gave my lawyer's business address, and it didn't get any farther than that. So, and then again, if you're operating a motor vehicle, I'll spend a moment on there. There was a case where a woman was walking her dog. She got to her car, her parked car. She sat in the driver's seat, and then a cop demanded her driver's license because she was operating her car, and she refused to give her driver's license. And she won that because the car was parked. Okay, so operating the car. Laws that are used to harass you. So if police think that you are going to assault somebody, which is trying to hit them, or if you're going to batter somebody, which means you're actually going to try to hit them, they can arrest you for that. The best protection is to stay a distance from the people who you're interacting with. So I think in a lot of protests, we're very comfortable. We can talk we can stand right next to somebody and we can talk to them and we can have a normal conversation. But if there's any heat in the protest, and I don't mean heat by police, I mean heat like if there's bad feelings in the protest, give some space between you and the other person And so if a police officer wants to screw with you, they're not going to say that you were so close, I thought you were going to hit him, and then they'll arrest you. So give some space. Conservatively, 4 feet, maybe 6 feet, just to protect yourself. I've been in situations like that where people are walking toward each other. I don't think there's any violence, and then police stop things because in their police mind there's going to be a fight. You may wear a mask, right? They don't arrest kids for trick-or-treating. Wearing masks are okay, but not to commit a crime. So if there is a law that says you can't wear a mask, it only means you can't go to 7-Eleven with a mask on, commit a crime, and try to hide your identity. But if you're protesting, you can wear a mask, and any law that says you can't is unconstitutional. You can stand still, like I said earlier, just because somebody has to walk around you doesn't mean you're blocking them. You may use obscenities, not always a good idea, but you can cuss your lungs out if you want to, and that's not against the law. If it's being recorded, sometimes judges and juries don't like to hear that. And so think about that if you're cussing, that if a judge hears this, if a jury hears this, they may be prejudiced against you just because you're cussing. You may give legal advice, like I said. You can tell people don't talk to cops. You can say things like that. But be careful, because if you don't know the law, you could give bad legal advice. Even though it's not illegal for you, you can still hurt somebody. So try not to give legal advice, but there's no crime if you do. You can film police, and please do. I have had several protests. Some of my clients here in the room have had video of interactions with police and security guards. If it wasn't for that video, we would have not had a lawsuit. If you file a lawsuit, you have the burden of proving things, and if it's your word against their word, you lose. You have the burden to prove it. They don't have the burden to prove the opposite. So enjoy filming police. Try to get their badge name, their badge number, get their face so they can be identified. Just try to help the attorney to know who it is who's violating your rights. There are unlawful gatherings if there is a large protest and there's an order to disperse. That is a good time to leave unless you want to risk arrest. You had a question?
Yeah, you said to try to get the police's identifying features. Do they have any legal obligation to, if they say what's your name, for example, while they're doing their job? Do they have any obligation to respond?
That obligation is not under the law, it's under the police department's policy. So the LAPD may say you must identify yourself, but the Orange County Sheriffs may say you don't have to. So it depends upon the jurisdiction.
Okay.
What happens as a practical sense is that if I have a video of, say, 2 police officers roughing up a protester, as long as I can tell where those police officers are from, this is Orange County Sheriffs, I file the lawsuit, I get the pictures of the sheriff, the deputies, and I tell the county, please identify these officers, and they're going to be obligated to do it. So even if they don't answer your question, as long as we can identify them with a badge number, a serial number, something.
Thank you.
Sure. So I already mentioned for permits, if you use amplified sound and there's a law against amplified sound, they can use that to harass you. Or if you want to protest in the street and you don't have a permit, they can use that to harass you.
Does a megaphone count as amplified sound?
Yes. And it depends on how the law is written. There was a law in Griffith Park that banned all amplified sound. This is amplified sound. So I'm banned because it says amplified sound. There is another law in Griffith Park. It's a long story, but they had 2 laws. The other law said amplified sound, such as radios and this, and it was much more in detail. So it depends on how the law is written, but yes. Be careful with contraband and medication. I knew of a lawyer who had, I don't know if it's diabetic medication. She had some kind of medication. She went to an anti-war protest. She was arrested. The medication was not in the prescription bottle. It was just in a plastic bag. And so she was held in jail much longer while they identified what those drugs were. So be mindful of that. If you have medication, make sure it's in the prescription bottle. Off the record, if you hide your weed in a prescription bottle. Okay. So, and then otherwise obey all laws. So police who want to screw with you, they will find ways to screw with you. I was at a Farmer John protest in Vernon, and as the protesters were leaving, one of the protesters just went a little over the stop line at a stop sign, and the police were there and they wrote him a ticket. Be hypersensitive to use your turn signal. Stop, stop, just do everything hyper correctly. And it also goes for parking. I've been to protests where I overheard a sergeant tell the police, ticket all the cars. What he meant by that was go to every parked car, find any violation you can and write a ticket, because we're going to get some of these protesters. So just be sensitive to those things. Okay, that is the end of the first session. I've got no idea what time it is or when lunch is. How are we on Q&A?
We got 10 minutes to lunch, so you can have a...
Fantastic, 10 minutes for Q&A. This is my little girl, Maya, and she has her little robe on. Yes?
For a leaflet like in California and other states too for vegan outreach. And then in California, it seems to be I can go to any university and go to any spot in the university. But when I go to other states, sometimes the police might tell me to leave. And my understanding is I kind of do have to leave.
So I'm licensed in California. I can't really speak to other states. There are nuances. One of the joys of California is that we do embrace free speech here, and the California Constitution gives us more rights to free speech than other states. And so that might be accurate, that the California Public University has more obligations than a similar public university in another state. What I would recommend for public universities is associate with a club on campus, and you'll have the right to be there as a citizen, you'll be the right to be there as a representative of the group, and that'll give you a lot more protection. So I have had protests at UCLA, and the UCLA police tolerate the protests. I haven't had a lawsuit about that. I assume it's because the California Constitution gives us more rights, but I'm not sure.
What did you do to get a talking to from the park ranger?
I have stories. This was at the LA Zoo 2006, and some activists were there petitioning to get Billy out, and the activists were being harassed by private security, and so they asked me to go there to help them. So I went there, and when the security was harassing the activists, I was harassing the security, and the security's like, what the fuck? And so they called the Rangers. The Rangers pulled one of the activists and started talking to him individually. And I knew this particular activist had a brain disorder. And so I was there as a legal observer, and I was standing far away, and I wanted to observe. So I walked closer so I could observe, and that's when the ranger said, you better back up, you better back up. So.
This is a question about these feedlots on the way to San Francisco. And I was wondering, for educational purposes, if one can, park the car, on the public, by the roadside, and then take, video photography. B, can one fly a drone to get because I was once, the police were calling about something, and I think it was kind of nothing happened to them.
The answer to both of those, so I don't know if people heard. So this question was about the feedlots in California. If you can stop outside on public property and film in, the answer is absolutely yes. If you're on public property and you're filming in, if they don't want something to be shown, they have to have a barricade. That is on them. Okay. If it's a residential circumstance, that's not what you asked. If there's a residential circumstance, you can still film the outside of people's homes. I would be careful not to film inside the people's home. That goes into peeping Tom category. That's different. But if you're on public property and you are filming things that are exposed to the public, you have 100% right to do that.
And flying a drone.
And then flying a drone is kind of the same framework. If it is a residential environment, I would not do that because of invasion of privacy. If it is a business context, then you have the right to do that.
Thank you.
I'll go far left.
Can you talk a little bit about, if any, the overlap between like musical performances and the protections that would encompass that, as well as free speech and the intersection?
That's a real interesting question. So if you're part of Rage Against the Machine and your music is political speech, you would get the higher protection.
Okay.
If it's just music, you get the lower commercial protection. So you're still protected.
Okay.
But if there's a conflict, then the free speech will prevail. And the example of that is there was a next night performance in Beverly Hills. There was a music concert. Somebody stood in front of the stage with a sign. They had the right to be there because their free speech with a sign was more important than the music. So the crowd wasn't happy about it, but also it was public property. I think it was a street, it was a public street that they just converted for that purpose. So when there's a conflict, political free speech prevails.
Awesome.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Similar question to the drone photography. Nowadays you can buy like satellite imagery from private companies. Is there any sort of protection there? Or?
No, it's in the public domain. If you want, again, I would be sensitive about anything that has to do with a residence. Our home is our castle, and so I would be very sensitive about anything residential. But if these are satellites, it's on Google. There's nobody is suing Google to say, get my roof off your database.
Yeah.
It's in the public
You
domain.
can buy like high quality real-time video of or photos of these feedlots.
Yeah.
Okay.
As long as it's in public, as long as you don't cross onto their property and you're in public, you have a lot of First Amendment protection. There are instances where you could actually enter the property, which goes into what we call the ag-gag laws, and that's a little more nuanced. I don't want to spend much time on that, but as long as you're on public property, you're good.
Yeah, could you talk a little bit about what the Pruneyard Shopping Center versus Robbins Supreme Court case?
So Pruneyard was the original case that started the trend to say that people are allowed to protest in a shopping mall. That was decided, I think, in the 50s or 60s or 70s, and it's been developed since then. All Pruneyard means is that a shopping mall has to give free speakers the opportunity to speak, even though it's private property. That's all Pruneyard says. And then other cases have defined it more, but that's what Pruneyard is. Pruneyard is a national law. It was a California case decided by the US Supreme Court. So I don't practice in other states, but it implies because it was a US Supreme Court case, it applies to all of the states. But I'm focused on California.
You mentioned having a very large venue, Magic Mountain, I think, that you're allowed to go like on the parking lot, maybe?
Yeah, or the sidewalk outside of the ticketing booth.
I'm wondering if the same would hold for SeaWorld in San Diego, if it's large enough to
Yeah.
Because a lot of the protests I see are out on the outside, but...
I'm glad you brought that up. As long as you're outside the ticketed area, the law protects you. SeaWorld will freak out. They will get you arrested, and then you sue them. But as long as you are outside the ticketed area, the law protects you. And there's always going to be nuances. I don't want to encourage somebody to do that unless you're really prepared to do it. So if you want to do something like that, talk to an attorney, figure out the best approach to protect your rights. But based on the laws that are on the books today, yes.
Pretty much like every protest I've been to that's on a public sidewalk, or when it's outside of a venue that has an event, I get told by security that like you're trespassing because we bought this public sidewalk and like police are on the way, and so like if you stay here while waiting for police, like basically we're gonna let them know that you trespass, like they're gonna be arrested for trespassing on this and whatnot. What would you say then at that moment, like when they would tell me something like that?
So are you familiar with Peanuts, Charlie Brown? And so when I hear security guards talk, I hear adults talk. Okay. That's me, but I realize, I've got experience and everything. Security guards lie or they don't know the law. If there is public property that is not like Sony that was leased for 50 years, If there is public property that's leased for a day, for a week, it is still public property and you have the right to protest there. The only limitations are going to be that you can't be inside of the booth. If somebody's selling hot dogs, you have to stay outside the hot dog booth. If somebody's performing on stage, you have to stay outside the stage. If it's a public sidewalk, they rented it, you still have the right to protest there. And if they're going, rah, 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 I would turn my back. Police go there, don't talk to police. You may, I never want to say talk to the police, but I mean, I may tell the police, like, this is public sidewalk, and cut it off right there.
Well, this is on ag-gag laws. Can you give us a little bit of an update on the latest ag-gag laws in California? And I ask because
No.
if somebody wanted to pretend to be, you know, a worker, apply, join, as you know, and then take photography and share.
So by and large, for ag-gag, for those of you who don't know, these large slaughterhouses, feedlots, et cetera, they don't want animal activists coming in with video cameras and taking pictures and getting people upset over all the blood. It's a different area of law. For the most part, what happens is that you get somebody undercover who pretends to be an employee, and then they go in and get secret footage. So, as far as I know, especially in California, but as far as I know consistently across the country, these ag-gag laws that prevent you from filming inside of a slaughterhouse, prevent you from filming inside of a feedlot or vivisection lab or whatever, those laws have been struck down as far as I know, but I don't know that I'm on top of every nuance. What I will add to that is that some of these companies have wanted to sue the applicant for fraud because they say if you're going to apply to be an employee and you don't say that you're working with PETA, you're committing fraud. And those have consistently been struck down. Those are, I can't imagine how a company could win on that, but they will try to scare you with that. So.
Just a related question. I mean, I joined this Agricultural Alliance. This is a major thing. They put out a handout for businesses how to spot an activist, an animal rights activist. There's a long list, and one has to log in and be a member to access that. Can I share that with people in my class, for instance, even though it's material?
In an educational context, yes.
It's not accessible to the public. It's because
educational context, yes. Copyright laws, there's fair use, fair use education, as long as you're not charging.
No.
Right? So educational, yes. I would encourage you to consult with an attorney specifically to make sure I'm not giving you bad advice. Everything I know, yes.
Right, thank you.
Are we going to continue Q&A afterwards, or is the second presentation different?
The second presentation is going to be, I mean, I think of it as basic and advanced. That might be a simpleton way to look at it. I think I called this one foundations, the next one is applications. So the second one has different material.
Okay. So we'll save the other questions for later?
Yes. Let me get one more, two more, and then we're done.
Do you know anything about the process of getting a permit for a protest and how hard it can be?
Wonderful question. See, there's always more and more and more material to add. Next year I'll have 3 hours. So the permitting is going to be the traffic authority, which is usually the police authority, and so you'd want to go to the police to get the permit. The process is supposed to be fair and neutral and regulated and moderated, and it's supposed to give you the benefit of the doubt because it's free speech. There are many lawsuits where the police chief has what they call unfettered discretion, and that's illegal. He cannot have, or she cannot have unfettered discretion. There has to be a well-established policy so that you are treated the same as the Girl Scouts, or treated the same as the people who want to do a bicycle through, like they want to shut down the street for a bicycle marathon or something. So it has to be fair. But you would start with the police department, and every time I say police, like talk to an attorney first, because the attorney can look over. I've looked over applications and said, well, let's move this over here, or let's emphasize that, just to make sure the application looks good. So talk to an attorney. And then last one.
Yeah, if a cop is in plain clothes and they approach you, like, and you had no way of knowing that they are a police officer, and you ignore whatever they're telling you to do, can there be repercussions? Should you ask, are you a cop? Anybody
who is not arresting you, I don't see any repercussions. Anybody who's not arresting you, you shouldn't give them your identification or shouldn't ID yourself. If they're arresting you, you don't talk to them. If they're detaining you, you don't talk to them. If they're in plain clothes or talking to you, why do you want to talk to them? My concern would be the opposite, that if they're in plain clothes, they might get you to talk, where you might shut up if they were in uniform. And so that would be my concern. I've had that before. I remember as a junior activist, there was some kind of a illegal something that happened, and I was standing around, and then some guy came up to me in plain clothes and started asking me questions. We were just like talking. He left, and then the activist came up and said, "I can't believe you didn't realize that was a cop." And I'm like, "What?" You know, so they train for this, you know. So
Yeah. Well, in my instance, it was just very specific. I went on the stage at Harvard Alumni Day, and I confronted the Harvard president. And then the plan was to then exit and kind of like disappear in the crowd, but there were like plainclothes officers on the either side of the stage. So they were like, "Stop, you can't go." And I'm like, "I'm just gonna keep going if you're a security guard." But then I didn't say anything, I was just gonna keep going. But then I'm like, "Well, are you a cop or are you a security guard?" And he said he was a police officer, he showed me his badge, so I stopped.
you have the right analysis. In that situation, the cop says, "Stop." He doesn't say, but he means you're being detained. You don't know if he's a security guard, whomever. I would ignore him until I understand he's a cop. You have to be given notice. I've been stopped by security guards with uniforms that look like police uniforms with a badge, with chevron, and they have no authority. I almost got in trouble until we actually zoomed in and saw like it says security guard company. They have no authority. And so even though they look like a cop, doesn't magically give him cop powers. He has to be a cop to have cop powers, and you have to know he's a cop. So I would just keep walking. But, you know, if they're a cop, they're going to stop you anyway, so, okay.
Did you take one more question? Or you
I
want me
could.
to talk to you privately?
No, it all depends.
I don't want to tell anybody this, but I think that's something that people should know. Okay, a friend of mine and I were in a really bad pet store where it was filthy and everything like that. And we went in and videotaped. And there may have been signs not to videotape, I'm not really sure. And the guy told us we needed to leave, and we were going to leave, but we still had our phone up, and the guy grabbed my phone out of my hand. Would that be called theft?
Yes. Okay, so I'll just analyze that very quickly. A business policy that says you cannot do something is not a law. It's just a policy. They say don't film, okay, whatever, I don't care. The business can tell you to leave. When they tell you to leave, if you refuse to leave, then it becomes trespassing. So just because you're videotaping, you're not breaking any law. They tell you to leave, you don't leave, it's trespassing. They have no right to take your property. They have no right to touch you if you are leaving. A business can use reasonable force to remove a trespasser. So if you refuse to leave, they could grab you by the arm and escort you out. They can't put you in a headlock and escort you out. They can use reasonable force to remove you after they tell you to leave and you refuse to leave. Okay, and that is theft.
Well, they did come over to my friend, which was on her walker, and the guy, the owner, like knocked into her and almost knocked her down. And I wanted my phone back before I left, so finally he gave me my phone back. Because I would have left, but I didn't have my phone, so he finally gave me my phone back.
Okay, so what an attorney would call that is lawsuit. Okay, all right, lunch.
Okay. Okay, everyone, lunch is ready in the corral. So